everybody, and welcome to another live broadcast from TrueFire Studios. Rob Garland is back. We've done another edition in the Chord Navigator series that I think you're going to love. But for those of you that aren't familiar with Rob, he grew up in England. You'll notice he does talk a little funny. He's not from New Jersey, he's from England. And he's played hundreds of gigs, tons of festivals. When he first got to the U.S. with his group, Rob Garland and the Blue Monks, he opened for B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Booker T. And that band got a lot of airplay on international radio and TV stations. Rob is a phenomenal educator. Right from the very start, we've loved working with him because he really knows how to present complex material in a very accessible way. In fact, he teaches at MI, the famous MI in Hollywood, California. Been featured in a ton of guitar magazines. Currently, he's out playing with his jazz funk band, Pentatonic, and his fusion power trio, Rob Garland's eclectic trio, all over the West Coast. He's worked with Jimmy Haslett, Scott Sanse, Tony Newton, Mick Stevens, Gus Thornton. Let's see if we can interrupt him. Tommy's really good at ducking down the audio, giving a nice little audio hint. There you go. Hey, man, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here, as always.
Oh, man, we're excited about the latest edition here, Chord Navigator.
Yep.
And, I'm hoping that some of the folks in our viewing audience can relate to the epiphanies we have as guitar players. You know, most of us start out learning, open position, the cowboy basic chords. And that first big epiphany is when you learn bar chords. Yeah. And that these shapes with 6th string and 5th string roots can yield minor and dominant and major and minor 7th and and in any key now. So it's like a big milestone in your growth. Then we learn the pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic, and all of a sudden we're able to start, big epiphany there as well. Harmonizing the major scale, understanding how progressions work, how all of the songs, popular songs, are basically stem from, 20 progressions, right? Right. Yeah. But if I had to plot it on, the map or timeline of epiphanies, Caged is right in there someplace. Maybe before harmonizing the major scale, maybe a little bit after. So I'd be interested in shouting out to the folks that are, chatting live with us, how many of you are familiar with the Caged system? And while they're doing that, could you just give us a quick overview on what Caged is all about?
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned the first thing you learn on the guitar are those cowboy chords. And if you think about what those cowboy chords are, and you spell the word caged, C-A-G-E-D, that's 5 movable chord forms. Mm-hmm. So you basically take those cowboy chords and move them up. Now, most people are already doing that with 2 of the shapes. Mm-hmm. With the E shape, because that gives you your big major or minor bar chord, and the A shape, which gives you the same thing. But you can also move those other shapes. Take, for example, the C shape. Okay, now if I was going to play a G chord using a C shape, what I've got to do is I've got to think about, almost like if I was using a capo, what would that chord look like if I moved it up the neck? And I have to allow for the fact that when I play that C chord in the open position, there's open strings. So I move that chord up the neck and I recreate the nut of the guitar with my first finger up here, and then I get my G chord with a C shape. Mm-hmm. But here's the part where, and some people learn that much caged, they learn those big shapes, move them around, and then they quit and they think, that's it, I've got the caged system. But the real magic is in the next step. Mm-hmm. The real magic is saying, okay, if you've got this big G chord here that's based out of a C shape, all you need to play a G chord or any triad is 3 notes. Mm-hmm. So why don't I just play the middle 3 strings? and suddenly I've got a cool Keith Richards style chord grip, or maybe the Doobie Brothers, depending on who you ask, right? And so if I was playing with a rhythm section or another guitar player, keyboard player, whomever, I can now find a second way to play this G chord other than these big voices, right? And what's great about that is I have other fingers free for these little embellishments, you know, and rhythmic ideas we can do around it. You could take that same idea, put it on the high 3 strings. And here's another one, that's a G chord. Remember, all you need is 3 notes, right? And with this one, this gives you the opportunity to add, you know, suspended chords and move notes around, you know. And something else happens when you're playing this chord like this or like this. There's only so many strum variations you can do. But when you're playing a chord like this, you can think about, what effects am I going to put on that chord? How am I going to pick it? Am I going to pretend I'm in the Who? You know, am I going to just arpeggiate it? You know, there's so many. Am I just going to play double stops? You know, like Steve Cropper or somebody might do. So many variations. And that's still the tip of the iceberg, really, because inside each of these shapes, you have all of your scales and the other chords of the key as well, which is, you know, for another time. But I mean, there's a wealth of information in there. But if you just start with the basic premise, take 3 chords, you know, G, C, and D, learn them as caged chords in one area of the neck. And the exercise I have my students do is I say, limit yourself to a span of 4 or 5 frets, 3 strings, and play those 3 chords. So let's say G, D, C. G, D, C. And before you know it, you're coming up with these lovely guitar parts that actually sounds like music, you know? So that's, to me, that's very quickly put the evolution of cage.
Yeah, and, you know, I think for, you know, we've noticed in terms of students, there's, you know, students that have really don't know anything about cage, and it is an epiphany once you learn it. But then there are students that know the principles of cage but haven't explored how useful that could be to them as a rhythm player or as a soloist. I think you've just illustrated one of the advantages. And the other advantage is, you know, we're all watching other players do stuff on guitar, at concert, you know, on video, whatever.
Yeah.
And you see them do any of the things you've just shown us, and you think it's some kind of like, what exactly is that?
Yeah.
Once you understand the principles of caged, you figure it out right away, because it's not rocket science.
No.
And it gives you the entire neck, the entire fretboard to kind of do your thing with rhythmically or otherwise. So the first edition of Chord Navigator, which we did, what, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago or something?
That one was a while back,
Is on triads, right? So quickly, just give them the main focus of what you did with triads.
So with that course, I took major and minor chords, and basically what I just said there, through the cage shapes, you know, and in each position, explore the different ways you could play the triads, you know, for major and minor chords. But more importantly, when you put those together, you can make music out of it. You know, like if you had a chord progression that was going from, let's say, C to G minor to F, you know, instead of those chords sounding very separate like that, they can suddenly become... And again, it sounds like a part. It doesn't sound like, you know, and what starts to happen when you do that is you start to see lines moving through the chords, voice leading, you know, and even if you don't understand those concepts, you can still see, because the cage system is very visual. So it enables you to connect triads together and see where the chords go through a song.
Yeah, even if you don't understand voice, it's happening anyway.
It's happening anyway, And you've heard it in every Beatles song ever.
Exactly.
You know,
and I remember one of the things you talked about, which is a very important principle for anybody that goes out and plays at jams in the band or whatever. You do not want to be playing those big bar chords if you're playing with a rhythm. You want to stay away from the bass. If you're playing with another guitar player, you don't want to be in the same register as him. So Caged is, man, it is a rite of passage, absolutely, to the next level of play.
Yeah.
Okay? So we did the triad thing,
Yeah.
and certainly there's a million reasons to not only understand the cage system, but understand how useful triads are.
Definitely,
Rhythmically or improvisationally, right?
And also blending the two together, because
Yes.
there's a misconception
Yeah.
that, you know, somebody plays rhythm over there and somebody's playing lead over
Right,
there. And that's
right.
the whole beauty of this system. Think about it. You play rhythm 80% of the time.
Yeah.
So why not be combining those
Absolutely.
ideas?
You know, we do this, and we're going again, New Orleans Folk Alliance, you know, and you'll
Yeah.
get to see a lot of singer-songwriters where the singer-songwriters playing pretty much the basic open position
Right.
chords, maybe a bar chord, and they'll ask a friend to come and, you know, play with them. They're using all of these little triad and cage shapes.
Yeah.
They're filling like you fill. Like,
Yeah.
you know, everyone would, I think, everyone would certainly benefit from, you know, that Jimi Hendrix,
Oh,
kind of the
absolutely.
Hendrix.
Yeah.
It's all right there in
Yeah.
the cage system. You
Yeah.
know? So then we did a second edition, which was dominant seventh, right?
It was actually major 7,
Major
minor
7,
7,
sorry,
and
sorry.
dominant 7. So yes.
Show them a little bit of that.
So basically what we would say is if you take the open position chord that we did in the first cage, so let's keep it simple, stick with the C chord, okay? How do we make the C chord a C major 7? Like that, we're adding a fourth note to it. And then we take the principle of whatever we do to the open chord through the movable shapes. And so now you have a G major 7
Right.
using a C shape, you know, or minor 7s. You know, here's A minor. How do we make that A minor 7? Now we can make that movable, you know, which is a really pretty voice thing, right?
Nice.
And so the idea was then, you know, we would take a standard kind of sounding chord progression like F, E minor, D minor, C, put those sevenths in there, and it starts to sound like Steely Dan, you know,
Right.
like, you
I
know,
know.
it starts to enrich the chords a little
Right.
bit. And I talked in that course about some places maybe where you might want to use them, places
Yeah.
where perhaps you would just stick with the triads, you know, just using your ear, playing for the song, but
Yeah.
also having that palette available that you can include those sevenths.
What students, you know, all of feedback, all of your courses, by the way, you know, 5-star ratings across the board. And the feedback we get is, you know, they get a higher understanding of what's happening on the fretboard, but they love doing the little fills that you
Yes,
do all the time.
yes. I heard
you
that
know.
a lot from students. Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
about that. I mean, we all want to do that.
Yeah, if
you
only
know?
there was a chord navigator part 3.
Yeah, there you go. So part 1 was caged triads, chord navigator. Chord navigator 2, caged sevenths, major, minor, dominant. And this week we just did.
We just did Chord Navigator Part 3, sequel to the sequel, and we're calling it Caged Embellishments or something like that.
So give us the elevator pitch on what we're doing here.
What we're doing here is we're revisiting those cage shapes, but when I would do things like, you know, if I was giving an example, I might go, that kind of thing. And it seems like, you know, for many people, those things kind of fall out of the sky. They might still be seeing the cage shape,
Right.
but how do you get to the point where we're sliding around these
Right,
double stops and all
right.
this kind of stuff? So
They want to do that.
They want to do that. They want to
Right.
do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I go through each of the shapes
Yeah.
for major and then each of the shapes for minor, and I show you what I'm thinking about when I play those ideas. And most of those ideas stem from, you know, the chord voicing itself, but also a pentatonic or major minor scale sitting in that chord. So this is starting that process of putting it all together as well.
Right,
you know.
exactly. So in the first 2, you were showing us some of these embellishments just to show the kind of the usefulness
Yeah,
of understanding.
real life application,
Now,
yeah.
And so people are going, well, how did he do that? And how
Right.
did he do this? And how... so give them an example. I think, how about that C shape example?
yeah.
Thirds, melodies
Yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So in the C shape, okay, so I'm playing a D chord here with a C shape. And what I did was I took the shape, and you could play a scale inside it, just a regular major scale, which sits right inside the shape. And then I harmonized the scale in thirds. And so basically, if you're playing over any D chord, you know, you can look at your cage shape, maybe you were just doing this, as your comping shape, and then you can have access to those double stops, and you can create, even if you're playing over a static chord, you could create a great little intro or a melody part like that, and so all the information for the key is contained within that scale and within those double stops. So basically, you can't hit a bad double stop.
Yeah.
You can play them in any order; it's going to work.
You know, the guitar being such a visual instrument,
Right.
unlike most instruments out there.
Yeah.
These shapes. Really, you can't hit a wrong note if you're familiar with the shape.
Exactly,
you know?
yeah.
But hey, Tommy, can you roll a track and let's put that shape and that little lesson to work here.
Okay. You know, the reason I play quite a
There's
complex
never just
rhythm,
one thing
and then,
with that. With you. You've got a million
well,
things
that's true.
with all of that.
But I wanted to make the point that you could also have a part that just went, and that's enough sometimes as well. You know, you got to think about what the song is as well. So in the examples, I tend to put a lot of embellishments in because that's what I'm showing you how to do. But just keep in mind as well, you can do as little or as much as.
Let's do that. Roll the track again, Tommy. Show us a very sparse application of it, because that's a really good example. All of these embellishments, they're filled up so that you can see all the possibilities, but you don't need to use them all at one time. Yeah.
You know.
Which is very likely the approach you'd take if there was a vocalist.
Exactly.
And, you're the second guitar player.
On its own, I wouldn't dance to it. But if there was a vocalist, then yes.
So let's do some shout outs and a little bit of housekeeping. I have to read you one of these comments. Where is it? Wait a minute. So somebody saw you at the Baked Potato out in California.
My favorite venue in the world.
I mean, it's like everyone's favorite venue. And I can't find it in the chat thing, but they basically said, saw you there, sold out house, incredible show, and thrilled to see that you're here it is. This is from Chengo Chiapponi. I've seen Rob play sold-out shows at Baked Potato in L.A. Great to see him teaching Share the Wealth. You know,
that's very nice. Thank you.
And I think it's it's a precious thing for we students of guitar to have folks that we love to see play. We're big fans, but then to have you kind of share. And pay it forward. I mean, that's really what TrueFire is all about. So
definitely,
there's proof positive.
Yeah,
you got one big fan out there.
Well,
okay, I think that means you've got thousands and thousands.
No, it's the same for me though. I mean, if I have some downtime, I fire up TrueFire and watch lessons of my favorite players as well. We all do it.
It's
great.
A great thing, and and it's a global thing. We ask. I haven't asked yet for you guys to chime in and tell us where you're from. I see Transylvania just chimed in. Caroli, how are you? There is a Transylvania.
Yeah,
and we have a guitar player, an avid guitar player there.
That's awesome.
Manchester, Illinois, England. Poland, Ocala, Florida, the UK, Oregon, Munich, Germany, Beverly Hills, Rome, New Zealand, Pennsylvania, Spain, Montreal, Galesburg, Michigan, Prague, Los Angeles, Sarasota, India, Vienna, Austria, Transylvania, Chicago, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So incredible, right? And thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm sure for some of you it's breakfast, for others it's 2 o'clock in the morning, But
in Transylvania, it could be a blood break. But
what time is it in Transylvania? And they're probably sick of those jokes, too.
Sorry.
Okay. He takes that back. So if we haven't shouted out to you, please let us know where you tuned in from. Let us know what time it is in Transylvania, Karoli. And if you have any questions for Rob, we're going to try to do a lot of teaching. And we've got a lot of ground to cover. Also, there is a trivia question. You don't even know about this, Rob, but we're going to give away a $100 gift card, good as gold on TrueFire, if they can answer this question. And by the way, do not answer this question in the chat feed, okay? That gives the answer away to everybody. Right. We're going to randomly select one person, give you a $100 gift card. So there is a link. It's underneath the video. Click on that link and answer that question there. You ready for the question?
Ready.
What other TrueFire educator did Rob perform with at the big Mama Jamma? Is it Mama Jamma?
Mama
Jamma Jamathon in Hollywood, California. What other TrueFire educator?
Great question.
That is a good question.
I like that.
That was pretty, I'm jealous too. I wish I had that opportunity.
It was very surreal. Yeah.
Click on the link, answer that correctly, and you are in the drawing. Another bit of housekeeping is I'm telling you, if you're not familiar with CAGED, or if you know a little bit about CAGED, or even if you know a little bit more about CAGED, this series is one of our top ranked, you'll see it's all 5 stars, okay, chord navigator. So there is a promo code, Garland Live. This is the gratuitous advertising part of the show, which
fine.
I'm allowed to do.
Absolutely.
You can't do it, but I can.
Yeah.
Okay. You use Garland Live as a promo code. You can get 25% off not only the first 2 editions of Chord Navigator and your other courses, but you can pre-order the 2 courses we're talking about today.
Very cool.
And and people who tune in every time we do one of these, which sometimes as many, know that I don't say this every time.
Right.
But from time to time, I will point out the courses that I really believe belong in every guitarist's kind of library of material. CAGED is really important. Don't even care if you don't use CAGED and you just want to get familiar with the shape so that you can see what other guitar players are doing and approach in your own way. But I'll tell you, once you go CAGED, there's no coming back. And listen, while you're over there, underneath the video, a thumbs up. If you're getting some good information today, show your love, and that helps spread the love for Rob and these Chord Navigator courses. All right, man, let's move on to sliding fourths in the G shape.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned Hendrix, and there's a lot of this kind of double stop work in Curtis Mayfield, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer. The list goes on. And basically, I had the idea that if you take the G shape, and we're going to play a D chord with the G shape. Inside that shape, again, you could play the scale, but what would it sound like if you harmonize the scale? So here's the scale, just a regular major scale, harmonized it in fourths. Okay, now on its own, doesn't sound like you'd be able to use that all the time, right? It's kind of a strong sound. But if you blend it, with the odd pentatonic lick and just be kind of, mindful of your rhythm, you can get some really, really cool fills and that evoke that style that we were talking about, that Hendrix rhythm kind of style.
Awesome. Let's roll the track, Tommy. that was the G shape sliding fourths.
Yeah.
By the way, it's 10:26 in Transylvania at night.
Okay.
Right now. Let's go and move over to the C minor shape.
Yeah.
And do some diatonic sixths.
Right, and so, I go through suspended chords, thirds, fourths, different kinds of double stops. And for the minor chord shapes, I particularly like the diatonic sixths because they have a very atmospheric kind of sound. So if I take a C minor chord shape, but an E minor chord, right? And I think about how I could play a scale over that. Well, the E minor scale would be the E natural minor. And so I thought, well, what would happen if we harmonize that whole scale and we would get... And these are great for even blues. Real atmospheric sounding sixths, and they just hang beautifully. And again, you can use as many of it or as little of it as you want to go behind a singer or to just kind of fill between verses. If you're playing a minor blues, you have a lot of time where you can put these little fills in, So that would be a good one to play with the tracks. I can show you.
Let's do that, Tommy.
And I should point out here, these examples we're playing, just to show you the techniques, but there are examples in the course where we're combining major and minor chords and even dominant chords and moving these ideas around a little bit as well. So, it's important to get used to being able to play them over these chord types, and then you can take them to your real life band practices or jam tracks or whatever,
Yeah, I think the way you've presented the video examples is, designed to get people comfortable with the shape and seeing kind of how many different things you can do. And to your earlier point, you don't throw everything in the kitchen sink, and you pick the things that will serve the song, right?
Yeah.
Couple of quick questions for you. Ayn Randy, is Cage good for learning jazz?
It is good for learning jazz because I talk about the 2-5-1 progression, which is the foundation for jazz, in the Caged Navigator Volume 2, because most jazz standards, the chords are always 4-note chords, minor 7, dominant 7, and major 7. So I talk about taking a 2-5-1, through the Caged changes, and by using 2-5-1 in different parts of the neck, it really gives you the foundation you need to work through jazz standards. So yeah, and actually, one quick side note on that as well. If you had, for example, a D minor 7 chord, a jazz player might play that kind of lick, and actually that lick is coming directly out of the Caged chord. So the more you get used to the visualization of what a minor 7 chord looks like, for example, that's where you're actually hearing jazz lines coming from. Not so much a scale, more literally connecting the chord tones to the, I could do a whole course on that, but, yeah.
But, people are, when they learn all the open position chords, everyone can basically play every song right there in the open position.
Right.
But the moment you take them out of that position, they're generally relying on movable bar chords, right?
Yeah.
and they're moving up and down the neck, where really they can find every chord they want right in position using the cage system and variations thereof.
Yeah, and I did a TrueFire course, a Take 5 course on melodic soloing chord tones, and again, especially with a jazz mindset, where you tend to be playing chord by chord. If you can see those chord shapes in the small triads, it's easier to extract your chord tones in the lead line, so it kind of all connects up.
Really nice. Yeah. So you cover a lot of embellishments with a lot of the shapes in this 3rd edition of Chord Navigator. And now let's share. Well, there's one other question here. Any advice to learn pentatonic shapes using the cage system?
Absolutely, yeah, and honestly, that would be something that I would want to do a course on. You know, it absolutely, because each of the 5 cage shapes lines up directly with each of the 5 pentatonic shapes. And here's a tip for you on that. Let's say you were going to play the G minor pentatonic, all right? And let's say you were going to play it in the C minor cage shape. One of the things that's driven me crazy over many, many years of teaching is the way that the pentatonic shapes are taught like that, you know, across all 6 strings. And that has no relationship to the chord or the key of G minor. That's just like, oh yeah, that's that one, that 3rd one that I know, right? If you play a pentatonic shape and practice it from the root of the cage shape, it sounds like G minor now, right? Now, you can still use all 6 strings, just go below it and come back. But if you start your pentatonic practice relating it directly to what the chord shape looks like, your phrasing improves because you're hearing the intervals of the pentatonic against the chord.
Point. Very good point.
So yeah, I would definitely encourage you to line up your pentatonic with your cage.
And talk for a moment, would you? We've talked about this many, many times about, you know, the rut we students of guitar get into, kind of, you know, muscle memory, stuck in the box, stuck in the rut. Talk about how Caged can help you, well, bust out of that rut, but also make you more inventive, creativity.
Well, if you're talking about in an improv setting, first of all there, just doing that, I've seen that blow their improvisations wide open. The reason being, we get so used to what we think of as the extended pentatonic scale, where we start in this familiar shape, you know, slide up 2 frets, slide up 2 frets, and that's what we use for 40 years, right? By investigating the way the pentatonic, and of course the other scales as well, but the pentatonic, for example, connects to these cage shapes, it forces you to phrase with parts of the neck that you've ignored for 30 years. So, and I've seen it happen time and time again. So, you know, it's like you can't rely on the same licks. You can try and play the same licks, but you got to play them in these other positions.
It won't be the same.
And so the ear has to now connect, and then you're actually hearing what the intervals are, and not just relying on the pattern. So I've seen a big change in people with that.
Absolutely.
You know?
Okay, so I don't want to not save enough time to do so. Chord Navigator 1, Chord Navigator 2, Chord Navigator 3. Use that promo code, 25% off any 1, 2, or all of them. They really do belong in your library. You know, you really need to get on this Caged thing, if only to understand how everything works. But I have a feeling you'll wind up using it. Every student that we've seen that has kind of embraced Cage as a way of looking at the keyboard and reinforcing their rhythm chops and their soloing chops, and you should really consider. That's another addition.
Oh, I'm considering it.
You know, because, you know, to that point, this whole pentatonic thing, you know, we have a lot of lessons here about learning your pentatonic shapes in different positions, but that goes hand in hand with understanding what's happening in that position. Quarterly speaking, triad, the sevenths, they're all right there. And now it starts to give you, you know, it quintuples your ability to make music all over.
You know, and I'm no different than everybody else. You know? I did it the other way for 20 years. And then I just started working through this Cage system, and it was much more logical to me. Because there's nothing worse than being soloing, trying to come up with an idea, and suddenly finding yourself going, oh, which position am I in? Which shape am I in? You know, because you get so stuck in that.
Absolutely.
You know, so,
The second course we did was a take 5 on modal improvisation.
Yes.
And in my list of epiphanies, you know, there are two types of players. They believe in modes, they think in modes,
Right.
and other people think they're a bunch of malarkey,
Yep.
you know. But what you can't deny are the colors and the sounds.
Right.
And so it's another rite of passage for a person to at least learn what modes are all about and decide whether they want to look or think about their music modally or not. So just describe what modes are, first of all.
So the reason I wanted to do this course, the reason why I wrote this course specifically, I would say this is the number one thing that I hear from students confused about is modes. Okay, a mode in its simplest terms is a scale that's derived from a parent scale or a parent key. Okay, so in simple terms, if you have C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and you start that C major scale on D, for example, and go through to the next D, that's now called D Dorian. Okay, that's point one. Here's where the problem comes in. Okay, this should be underlined. That is not D Dorian unless you're hearing it over either a D minor chord or a song that has the tonal center of D minor, D Dorian. Because otherwise, you're just playing C major, and that's what people get so confused about. You know,
and so tell us how you've approached presenting. The Take 5 format is kind of get you up and running. You do a tutorial up top, and then you do 5 performance studies.
Right, exactly.
So let's do level 1.
Okay.
Let's give them level 1, Lydian.
Right.
I shouldn't have even said Lydian. No, you know what we'll ask him is who sounds like this.
Right, there you go,
Don't say who sounds like this.
Yeah, okay.
But talk about Lydian, where it comes from.
Okay, so Lydian is basically a major mode, okay? It's a major scale, and the only difference between Lydian and the regular major scale is the 4th degree is raised. So it has a sharp 4. So the sound of it, if I play a B chord, and then you hear Lydian over it, so it has that raised 4. And that raised 4th in itself, to me, suggests kind of a dreamy, kind of open sound that the natural 4 doesn't have, okay? And so that's the Lydian sound. It's the 4th mode of a parent scale. And, you know, in the course I talk about where that's relevant and where it's not. But for our purposes here, just think of it as a sound. You know, the way I simplify modes is I say each of them has one characteristic. You know, Lydian, the characteristic is the sharp 4. So all you got to do is take your major chords, play that scale with the raised 4, and you're getting that Lydian sound, okay? Now, the other thing is there's such a thing as a Lydian chord progression, which is where we have 2 major chords next to each other. That should be pretty familiar, that sound, to a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And so what that's doing is, you know, where confusion comes in, somebody might say, well, if you have a B chord and a C sharp chord, isn't that going to the key of F sharp? Isn't that home? And I would say yes, if there was an F sharp chord, because it goes there. But this chord progression, our first example, doesn't go there. It just stays between the B and the C sharp chord. And the B is enforced even more because the bass note sustains through both chords. So therefore, the tonal center is B Lydian. And that's the scale that fits the chords, and that's where you're going to get all your melodies from.
So let's do this. Let's roll the track, which is the track those 2 chords.
It's those 2 chords, yeah, exactly.
And we'll see if our folks that are chatting with us can identify, you know, what artist is sort of synonymous with this sound. At least
several, I'd say. But
several sounds, but certainly this one too.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tommy, roll the track. Couple of guys got it right away, of course. Satriani, Steve Vai.
Yeah. And I would also put Frank Zappa up as a big one there as
Zappa
well.
for sure. Yeah. So again, just to repeat one more time, what two chords you were playing?
Yeah, I was
and
playing
what Lydian scale?
Right.
Because go ahead and record two chords, play the Lydian. You're going to have a blast doing it, and I think that's the illustration, the picture worth 1,000 words, so to speak.
Right.
What were the two chords?
The two chords were B major and then C sharp major, but with B in the bass. Okay, and that ties us back to that B chord. And then that was the B Lydian mode.
Which is B major with a raised fourth.
Which is B major with a raised fourth and an F
go.
note in it. Yeah.
Have that.
And one thing to do as well is, and here's one other application that's very, very handy. If you play jazz or anything remotely jazzy, you can play Lydian over any major seventh chord as well. It doesn't have to be derived from a parent scale. If you're playing a jazz 2-5-1,
Yeah.
when you get to that one chord, when you get to that one chord, you can play Lydian over it. So people think they have to sit around and wait for a Lydian chord progression to come along. That's not true. You can use Lydian over any major chord, depending on if you want to get that sound.
And if you were playing over, say, the G major, would you use G Lydian or?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
From the root of the chord, the root of the major seven chord.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about Mixolydian.
Okay.
This would be level 3.
Yeah.
So in the take fives, they kind of get a little progressively more sophisticated.
Yeah.
So talk about Mixolydian.
Well, this one I wanted to include. I included this chord progression: E, D, A, E. Okay, maybe somebody could tell us what they think a song is that uses this chord progression: E, D, A, E. Okay, I can think of about 30 while I'm sitting here, right?
Takes me way back.
right. So without giving that away, the reason I wanted to mention this particularly is I see there as being two different ways to use Mixolydian. First way is what I call the Mixolydian chord progression, which is that, okay? And basically, you could look at those chords and you could say, well, I've got A, D, and E, so is that not just a 1-4-5 in A? And the problem with that way of thinking is, yes, you could play the A major scale over it, but it's not going to resolve, because where is home with that? If you listen E, D, A, E, that's home. That's the tonal center, right? So therefore, the mode that matches that is the A major scale starting on that E, starting on its tonal center, which is E Mixolydian. And the characteristic of the scale is that it has a major third and a flat 7. Now, the reason I mentioned the chord progression is because, that chord progression is very, very popular in sort of classic rock, as we call it these days, right? And so if you're playing in a band and you're soloing over that, chances are you're playing major pentatonic over that, like the Allman Brothers or something, right? So if you're playing major pentatonic, you're missing two amazing notes that you could add to your solos, okay? The fourth and the flat 7, because the major pentatonic's okay, but as soon as you get... it gives you some really greasy, cool notes that you can use over it, right?
Nice.
So that's the first thing. I want people to be aware that all of those kind of classic rock progressions, the Grateful Dead, that whole jam band scene, most of it's Mixolydian, right?
It is.
So, and people reach for major pentatonic, and I go, there's two more notes you could have there that are great, So that's the first concept. The second concept is just playing over a dominant chord, right? Dominant chords, blues, funk, jazz, they're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you see a dominant chord, the chord scale, the mode that matches that chord is Mixolydian, because the chord has a major third and a flat 7, which is what Mixolydian is.
Yeah.
So what I did was I put a track together that had the Mixolydian chord progression followed by 2 bars of the Mixolydian chord. So you could, if after that you can't hear Mixolydian, maybe this business isn't for you.
Let's roll that track.
All right.
Here's the acid text.
It's a very identifiable sound, I think.
Very
you know.
identifiable,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of folks recognize or familiar with that sound.
Right.
Perhaps didn't understand its relationship to Mixolydian.
Sure, yeah.
But I think you make a great point about these modal approaches. It's usually one or two notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's only 12 notes to work with, but
Right.
Those notes in the context of that scale bring out a flavor or color or character.
If you're hearing it over the
you're
chord
hearing it,
or the chord progression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you've done a great job in this. I mean, take 5, they're basically shorter, get you up and running right away courses. If you've never really explored modes but would like to get up to speed quickly, you might find yourself digging deeper after you go through
and I
this
also
take
would
5.
like to say, this course is not about learning my licks at all.
Right.
This course is more about learning the approach, so that in your own playing, or your own writing, jamming, if you see these chords coming up, which you will, you have some options.
Exactly. Then you do, in level 4, I thought was very cool, you blend Dorian and Mixolydian.
Right.
Talk about that.
Well, that's a concept some people call modal interchange. They should probably get out more, but modal interchange is when you take more than one tonal center. Yeah. So the song, let's see what the chords are in that one. Right. So I was playing a G minor 7 to a C9 or a C7, which is a very standard very common kind of thing, a funk thing or a Latin thing or even a Pink Floyd thing. So. But anyway, so those two chords, again, you would think that would resolve to F, but it doesn't. It stays on G minor. So therefore, G minor is our home tonality for those two chords. That gives us G Dorian, okay? Because G minor is the 2 chord in F. Dorian is the second mode. I mean, I go into this in more detail. You don't have to get too bogged down with the theory, but you're going to hear what it sounds like. If you want to hear Dorian, play a G minor chord and listen to the way the 6th sounds. That's Dorian to me in a nutshell. And then so we do that for a few bars, and then we have a static vamp of an E flat 7 chord. And as I was saying in the last example, when you have a dominant 7th chord on its own, Mixolydian, right? So I thought it would be good for the ear, and also the mechanics of learning modes to try to shift between 2 modes on the same jam.
Let's give that a go. And so to be clear, the first you're going to vamp on G minor to C,
which 9, is G Dorian, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Well, you'll encounter that a million times.
Yep.
And then you're going to go to
E flat 7,
E flat
which is like
7,
a funk part,
and play. You're going to start with the Dorian mode over the first 2 chords, and then Mixolydian over the E flat 7.
Exactly,
and the E flat Mixolydian.
E flat Mixolydian, exactly. Right. And the listeners should listen out for when that change comes, because I think it'll be pretty obvious.
Okay, Tommy, roll the tape. There's no tape here.
stuff.
It's such a great illustration too of, I think it's very clear to everyone to hear the different colors or textures of each of those modes. And to Rob's point, the way Rob designs all of his courses are, he gives you the information, then he gives you kind of a way to get those sounds and those shapes, kind of get a grip on them. And it's all designed to empower you then to infuse that in your own playing, whatever you choose to do. So that one we call, I
think we was thinking
was it modal improvisation or modal musicality?
Modal improv, we're thinking.
Modal improvisation, take 5.
Yeah.
So again, both of these new courses are available for pre-order. There's that 25% promo code. Thank you, everybody, for those thumbs up. You must have made a lot of people happy. We've spent an hour together, and I know I've learned a ton of new stuff just sitting here listening to you for the hour. Thank you guys for those thumbs ups. We really appreciate it. And you have, I think, still time to answer that trivia question. Maybe just a minute or so. Do not answer it in the chat. But the trivia question is, what other TrueFire educator did Rob perform with at the big Mama Jamma? How do you pronounce that?
Mama Jamma.
Mama Jamma. Jamathon in Hollywood, California. Click on the link, answer it there, and we'll pick in probably a minute or two a winner. While you're doing that, let's do 2 things. A little bit of a gear rundown.
Sure.
Everyone loves the gear thing.
Yeah.
And also tell us what's kind of going on in your world, promotionally speaking or otherwise. So first, the guitar.
Yeah, so this is my main guitar made by Exotic out of Van Nuys, California. And I started working with them a few years ago, and they're a great company. And this has a flame roasted maple neck, which looks really pretty, and I don't have any finish on the back of my necks because I like them like that. So, and these are their own pickups that they make in house, which are the Exotic raw vintage pickups, which I really, really like. So that's the guitar. Funny thing about this guitar is, you don't choose your serial number for your guitars. This guitar came out with the serial number 666, so I've nicknamed it the Blue Devil. So there you go. There you go. That's this guitar. Amp-wise, I'm still playing. I have an endorsement with Bogner, so I still use the Bogner Shiva amp. I'm enjoying this Princeton. You got to hear those. It's a lot of fun. And as far as what's coming up, I still play around the Los Angeles area with jazz funk band called Pentatonic, and we play at the Baked Potato and Alva's and Vitello's and those kind of places. And then I have my trio, Rob Garland's Eclectic Trio. And we play a lot of different styles in that band, and I do a lot of my vocal original music as well as the instrumental stuff. And I have a couple of new songs coming out, should be out in the next couple of months with vocals, and those are going to be up on Spotify and iTunes and all the usual places.
Nice.
If anyone wants to hear that stuff, best place to get hold of me is on my website. And also I should point out, I send out a free, let me say that again, free weekly email with a guitar lesson in it, motivation advice, practice tips, anything I can think of every week. And if people want to receive that, if they go to my website, they can subscribe there for it for a free email.
So spell your website for us.
Website is Rob Garland, ROBGARLAND, robgarland.net. Net.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go there. Rob is definitely, I'm trying to remember how we connected way back when, but.
Well, I think it was when I started one of your first classrooms, and that's got to be 10 years ago,
a long time ago. And, we're so thankful, man, because you make such a big contribution. And Rob is, he's a walking encyclopedia. Any topic we come up with, or if we have a question, you're usually the first person we'll call up and say, hey, what do you think about this kind of musical concept? He's, you got a taste of it. In just an hour, we covered modes, we covered a lot of caged, and you can tell that these waters run pretty deep.
If any of the people out there are going to go to the NAMM show, I'm going to be working that all 4 days. I'll be there, so maybe I'll run into you.
Oh, nice.
So,
There's a lot of TrueFire artists out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In fact, try to hook up with Massimo Varini.
I see him every year. I see him at DV Mark every year.
He's going to be out there, and he's coming
I saw
here
that. Yeah.
next week.
Yeah,
So
I see him every year, so that's great.
Your live things and sessions are like bookends,
I know, right?
you know?
Yeah, he's great. He's a nice guy.
So thank you for carving out this time
Thank
to spend
you.
with us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and sticking with us through this. Rob Garland, don't forget that promo code. It's only good for like 48 hours or so. It's I'm telling you, these are things you need in your, guitar instruction library. And if you would, how about taking that track from level 2?
Okay.
Do you remember what mode is that?
Level
Tommy?
2 is Dorian.
Let's do a little Dorian, shall we?
All right.
Take
Sounds
us out.
good to me.
Thank you, everybody,
Thanks,
for
everyone.
tuning in. We'll see you next time.